When it comes to video games, RPGs are a genre I have never really touched for the longest time. My disdain of RPGs started with Pokemon Sword and Shield back in 2020. I tried it out, and I hated it. The turn-based combat was uninteresting to me. Like, why do I have to wait my turn to attack? The story was very uninteresting. I avoided battles because they were uninteresting, so I was underleveled and got destroyed by the gym leaders. I think I got to the ice gym leader and dropped the game. Then, every other time I've tried to play an RPG, whether it be Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, Xenoblade 3, or whatever, these types of games could never really capture my attention for one reason or another. However, everything changed with Pokemon Legends ZA. This game is genuinely one of the most fun games I've ever played. No joke. At first, I was not the slightest bit interested in ZA. The game just looked like normal Pokemon, which never appealed to me. However, what got me intrigued was the real-time battling system, replacing turn-based battles. I thought this was really cool. I was still not convinced to drop $70 on this game. However, when this game came out, I was able to see one of my friends, who is a massive Pokemon fan, play the game, and honestly, it looked pretty fun. The battling looked very satisfying. So, I ended up picking up the game, and man, I couldn't have predicted how much fun I would have with this game. Starting off with the gameplay, it's surprisingly really fun. The gameplay loop of catching Pokemon during the day and fighting trainers at night is incredibly satisfying. While it might get repetitive for some people, I was constantly having fun just exploring the rooftops of Lumiose, destroying Mega Crystals, doing side quests, catching Pokemon, and filling out the Pokedex, especially considering it uses the Legend style of catching, which actually made me want to catch Pokemon and get into battles. The promotion matches were incredibly satisfying to clear. Mega evolving my Pokemon and seeing the amazing designs was also really cool. Taking on Rogue Mega Evolutions with Team MZ was awesome. Speaking of Team MZ, the story was really great. Pokemon Legends ZA's story was much different from any other story I've ever seen in the game. Instead of the game feeling like a normal story with you progressing and seeing more and more new locations, you stay in Lumiose City the entire time. While this does sound disappointing, what it ends up doing is leading to the game having an almost episodic story structure, where every day is almost like a new adventure, which honestly really worked for me. While I was playing, I got really immersed into the game. The characters were really well written, the plots were fun, and you having to deal with some weird stuff like a narcissistic streamer, the frickin' Mafia, Team Flare makes a comeback. There were just so many cool characters you meet along the way. This game almost felt like a second life for me while I was playing. Once I clocked out for the day and played this game, it was actually able to be a really good form of escapism, which was really cool. While this game has its fair share of problems, the graphics are trash, the game is a little too short for my liking, locking Megastones behind online is scummy, Tawny as a character is kind of half-baked, or Urbane I guess. I could write a whole essay on how bad Tawny is, but overall, it's still a really fun game, and is still one of my top 25 games of all time. After I played Legends ZA, I was itching for another RPG, and instead of playing another Pokemon game, I decided I would play Final Fantasy VII Remake. This game is my favorite RPG of all time currently, and in my top 10 games of all time. If you stalk my community tab, you would know that this was my first game I picked up this year, and it has genuinely been awesome. First off, the story is great. Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barret, and the rest of Avalanche were really compelling characters. The story kept me insanely engaged throughout the entirety of its runtime. The whole story is pretty serious, however, there are still moments of comedy thrown in there. I mean, one of the bosses in the game is literally a house. Not even joking. But that doesn't undercut the serious moments. I mean, if you haven't played Chapter 12, Fight for Survival, you haven't lived. In this chapter, an entire plate is being dropped on Sector 7, and in this chapter you have to climb the tower with Tifa, as all of the members of Avalanche you've come to know over the course of the game slowly die. And once you make it to the top of the tower, you have an intense battle, and the plate still ends up getting dropped, and it's just insanely peak. This is all without talking about the amazing battling system. In this game, you attack with the square button, and you can go into the menu to do commands with stuff like extra abilities, magic, or items to heal and revive members of your party, for example. However, you can't spam the menu commands, as you only get 2 uses. After 2 uses, you have to wait for the menu commands to recharge again. This setup made it really satisfying to go into combat, and it had a degree of challenge at multiple points. I ended up dying quite a few times in this game. Maybe it's because I was under-leveled or under-geared or something like that, but there were quite a few fights that were challenging to me, specifically the final boss against Sephiroth. While there were a few areas of the game that I didn't like, exploring the sewers was very boring, and coming back to the sewers was a pretty big disappointment. However, I don't think that takes away from how the game is a masterpiece in almost every way, and I'm really excited to pick up Rebirth as soon as possible. After Final Fantasy VII Remake, I was convinced that RPGs could be kind of fun. It was probably just turn-based RPGs I didn't like. However, after my second replay of Legend ZA, I wanted more Pokemon content, so I decided to return to an old foe. Pokemon Sword and Shield is a game that gets a lot of criticism online, and most of it is very valid. However, I still had a fun time with it. Nowhere near as much fun as I had with the other games I've talked about, but I still had quite a bit of fun. While turn-based RPGs weren't something I was interested in before, I guess it just clicked now. And maybe it's just because I was too impatient before and wanted constant action. However, Sword and Shield was kinda just a short but sweet game. I liked the battles, the Pokemon of this game were really cool, I really liked Hop as a rival, even if the story was not that good. The only major problem I have with the game is the awful graphics. The game straight up looks like it's running at 480p sometimes. However, I still do like the art style of the game. It just isn't very graphically optimized. However, hopefully it will get a Switch 2 patch to fix that. However, even if it doesn't get one, it's still pretty solid. This got me to buy Pokemon Fire Red / Leaf Green, and it's pretty fun. The battling is cool, I love all the pixel art, there's more of a challenge in this game compared to the other Pokemon games I've played. However, the story is kind of just there and it's kind of boring. However, it's still a pretty fun game that I can't wait to finish. So, this leads to the present, and currently I'm in the middle of playing through Xenoblade Chronicles 3. While I wasn't a fan of the game before, after starting a new save file, I have no clue what I was on before. The story, it's great all the way through. Might Dethrone Majora's Mask is my favorite story in a video game. The combat, the characters, the masterful soundtrack, the exploration, the cinematography and the cutscenes, everything about this game is great. My only issue is that it looks pretty bad. While I'm aware that's because it's a massive open world RPG on Switch 1, well, that's still a flaw with the game. And I'm not saying that the art style is bad, I actually really like the art style. I'm just saying that the actual graphical fidelity is bad and a lot of the textures are very low res. I just hope this game gets a Switch 2 patch. Out of all games on the OG Switch, all of the Xenoblade games desperately need one. However, this is my experience with RPGs. Honestly, this whole video proves that it's important to try other games. While I didn't like RPGs for most of my life, all it took was one game and everything clicked. That's why I think I'll keep trying to play more franchises. While I'll always still love Sonic, Mario, Zelda, Splatoon, and Kirby, the more I've expanded my gaming palette, the better I have become as a video game fan, and a better game critic in general. It also has introduced me to some of my new favorite genres, games, and franchises. While I'm not going to click with every game, I still have no interest in visual novels or guitar games or the majority of first-person shooters. However, all it takes is for one game to change my entire perspective.